Hello, and welcome to the first ever From Lansing with Love. I'm your host, State Representative Leslie Love. Every month, we will bring you interesting guests to talk about a wide variety of subjects that I hope will be both informing and entertaining to the residents of House District 10. I look forward to your feedback. Thank you for being with us today. As you know, February is Black History Month. Since 1926, long before the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights era, our nation has chosen February to commemorate and acknowledge African American men and women and to honor their struggle for equality and justice. In many ways, that struggle continues today. While we hold special events in February to honor the great accomplishments of outstanding African American citizens and also to acknowledge our history. We should also remember that African American history is our entire nation's history. Michigan has a special place in the African American experience. And my guest today, Mr. Charles Ferrell, the Director of Public Programs at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. Mr. Ferrell is an alumni of Amherst College in Massachusetts and the University of Michigan and has been at the museum since 2012. He's the founder and directs the groundbreaking and acclaimed Liberation film series that focuses on the escalating injustice experienced by people of African descent in America today. So, thank you and welcome, Charles, to From Lansing with Love.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I am so glad that you made it. So let's get right into it. Can you tell us about what you do? What's your role at the Museum of African American History?
As Director of Public Program, I visualize, actually implement a variety of programs. Actually, last year we had 350 programs. Actually, programs that cut across a wide range of areas, such as youth-focused programs. We are also partnering with Detroit Public Schools in a number of programs. We have exhibitions, major exhibitions. Our primary core mission is contained within our core exhibition called Instill Our Rise, which actually allows someone to actually go through in a very short time a full range of history, where I think it's very important to start with Africa. So we actually have that exhibition, as well as we have changing exhibitions in a few of our galleries. Right now we have an exhibition focused on black dolls called I See Me, response to Kenneth Clark's famous experiment or a questionnaire to young black women, young girls who would normally pick a white doll versus a black doll, which is still present today. So we're really trying to focus on the conceptualization of our identity through that exhibition.
Right.
In addition, we have an exhibition on Lenny St. Clair. Lenny St. Clair, the Kresge eminent artist, has a photography exhibition of various musical icons that exist at the museum. So all our areas are very robust and active. You asked me about spoke about the Liberation film series, for example.
Before we go there, it's really interesting because over the years, that Still I Rise exhibit has transformed over time. When the museum first opened, it had the basics, and then it grows and grows every year. Is the exhibit now, is it a continually growing kind of exhibition, or is it what you'll experience all the time now, or is it always evolving?
Well, it is always evolving. As we look at the Black Lives Matter development, that aspects of history will come into the museum. So there's certain components that we revisit to refresh so it becomes relevant and continually of interest to the community at large.
That's good. You say relevant, and I've been to the museum several times, and some of the exhibits, that's the core exhibit, the Still I Rise.
Right.
But I also have been there when they featured African American play and the costumes of African American plays.
Yes.
You mentioned the I See Me, the doll exhibition.
That's
I
correct.
remember coming there, and there was one for the Deltas, and Coca-Cola had a little bit in there because
Right.
their relationship must go a
Right.
very long way. In 2017, in this day and age, is it necessary to have a special museum set aside for African American culture and history?
Unfortunately, yes, and we see this with the National African American History Museum that was just came September 24th of this past year, which had been a fight for more than 50 years. We have a visionary in Charles Howard Wright, who is OBGYN from Dothan, Alabama, who had the vision because you have to remember 1965, during that time, there was had always been this consistent effort to extract African American contributions from the major American narrative. So we saw in the 60s this whole push by the youth to bring black studies into the college community. But so that's really decimated and destroyed our community when you rob someone of their history. So if you can imagine your own life not having a space of time where you have no knowledge of what happened. So what's been, because of chattel slavery and effort to dehumanize African Americans, to say they had no history, and we even see Hegel, the famous philosopher, who would say that Africa has contributed nothing. Today you can Google King Tut, for example, and you'll see a white image of King Tut. So this continues, the extraction of Egypt out of Africa, as though there's no basis of, in terms of the high level of civilization that took place.
Right. I think
we have to own that.
Right. There are moments in our history that we didn't know about, or it was very few. It wasn't widely publicized. For example, the recent release of Hidden Figures.
Absolutely.
The movie. And to know that there were these black women who were computers and at NASA.
Right.
Where was this history? And even in the museum, I don't think I've seen this in the museum. Where has this history been? And what's the museum's role in making sure that we discover these things that we're just finding out in 2017 and 16 that it happened 50, 60 years ago?
Right. Yeah, that is our effort, is to continue to reveal our history. It's an ongoing process of study and learning. Really, the truth has not fully been told. There continues to be excavations of artifacts in the world. Our contribution has been quite significant. The United States would not exist as it does today without the contributions of African and African Americans.
Absolutely. So speaking of that, Black History Month.
Yes.
February is recognized now in America as Black History Month. And sometimes people make jokes of, oh, we got the shortest month of the year.
Right.
But there's some significant relevance that it being in February and its in its history. Can you speak a little bit about the history of Black History Month?
Well, sure. Carter G. Woodson, who was born in 1915, actually and founded the Journal of Negro History, was very intent on making certain that African contributions were well known and really a part of mainstream history. So the initial focus was around the month of highlighting the birth of Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. Of course, we at the Charles Wright Museum celebrate African American history 365 days a year. So that is our mission, and we think it should be the mission of most of America to interweave our story within the major narrative. And not just necessarily starting with African American history, but our story actually goes to Africa. And that's really one of the central points in terms of allowing our young students to be able to own math and science and technology that you see encoded in the pyramids of ancient Egypt.
Do you know whether Mr. Wright, his conviction and commitment to Black history, how did he get involved in Black art, culture, and history, that he started this museum in a little house, and then we had the kind of, it's a nice sized museum before it moved into this huge edifice that we now have on Warren Avenue. Do you know the trajectory of that story?
Yeah, so in 65, he actually started, as you indicated, in his house, and he also had a mobile, a bus that students could go on to, and it would travel to various schools. Dr. Wright was an activist. Dr. Wright actually provided medical care in the Selma March. He has written several books. Two of the books focused on Paul Robeson. He did quite a bit of work in terms of the campaign to free Nelson Mandela. So we see a very conscious man of means who thought it was very important for the youth to be able to understand their history so that they could evolve more effectively in this society. And it started with the International Afro-American Museum. That was the original name. And as in '78, when the city leased a section of land in the Midtown area on Frederick Street to Charles Wright, the museum was called the International Museum of African American History. And perhaps 10 years later, the museum moved to its current location where it has been for the last 50 years, the largest museum in the United States, 25,000 square feet, taking on the name of Charles Wright in 1996. And that was primarily the vision of Coleman Young, which frankly, Coleman wanted to have this edifice of African American history in Detroit. And only in 1997 did the name Charles H. Wright, come to the museum itself.
So tell us what's happening at the Charles H. Wright for Black History Month.
For Black History Month, we're really starting on with a conversation between two of America's greatest artists, Ali McGee and Bill Harris. Bill Harris is the eminent artist, playwright from Detroit. And Ali McGee, one of the most significant abstract painters who look at the concept of the celestial movements in his art and have a conversation in between them. Both of them actually graduates of Cass Tech in 1958. So that should be a very enriching experience in terms of culture. We also have a visiting choreographer coming in from New York, Nathan Trice, who's been working with Detroit Public School students that would put on a series of dance performances on the 3rd and the 4th of February. We have, since July of last year, began commemorating the 1967 rebellion. And we've created over 67 programs looking at rebellions globally and nationally to take a larger historical arc so we can begin to more clearly understand what happened during those 7 days. So in February, we'll be looking at the 1898 Wilmington Massacre with Professor Jeff Ward and filmmaker Christopher Everett. You spoke about hidden figures. We will have Gigi Coleman, Betsy Coleman, one of the first female aviators, her grandniece coming to do a reenactment. Again, this will be focused toward Detroit Public Schools. So we've adopted a number of schools that we actually bus into the museum to provide them more enriching experience they would not get, as you know, the current issues with Detroit Public Schools. We also have embraced freedom schools at the Charles Wright. So every Saturday from 10 to 12, we have former professors such as Dr. Gloria House and many others who are lending their time to make certain that our young kids are being further enriched and not, from a self-determination standpoint, not leaving it to Detroit Public Schools. One of the highlight programs that we have in February is we have 3 major scholars, Dr. Leonard Jeffries out of City College of New York, Professor Small, and Dr. Wade Nobles, who will be doing a tribute program to one of our greatest historians, master teacher John Henry Clark, February 25th, a must-see program. Our programs are very fluid. I would invite your listeners to go to our website, look on our event page to see the multiplicity of programs that we'd have to offer in February.
What's that website?
www.thewright, that's T as in Tom, H as in Harold, E as in Edward, Wright, WRIGHT.org.
Right. Well, this sounds like the museum is full of wonderful programs. We've talked about art, scholarly lectures, dance, acting, and we'll talk about after the break your Liberation film series.
Absolutely.
And how that plays into it. So it's time for us now to take a short break, and we'll be right back with Mr. Charles Ferrell and more about the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History.
Visit the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History for amazing exhibits, spectacular performances, film, poetry, and dance, all at the Wright Museum. An experience you won't forget, and a history you'll always remember.
Welcome back to From Lansing with Love. We're here with our very special guest from the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, Mr. Charles Ferrell, and we're talking about Black History Month and what's going on at the Charles H. Wright Museum in Detroit, Michigan. So, Mr. Ferrell, before the break, I hinted to your Liberation film series. Tell me how this got started. What is the Liberation film series, and tell me everything about it.
Yeah, I think it's so apropos that I'm in Lansing. The Liberation Film Series had its root in the life and work of Malcolm X. Malcolm X actually believed in reading and independent thinking, critical analysis, and informed activism. There was a major work by Dr. Marable Manning called A Life of Malcolm X, A Life of Reinvention, that was published in 2012. The museum at that point did not have an annual Malcolm X Day, and I convened Herb Boyd and Hakima Abudi to come to Detroit to talk about the response that was encoded in a book that they had published called Malcolm X Real, Not Reinvented. And it was really a standing room only turnout for this program, and I was asked if I had any additional ideas. Just as Detroit is a food desert, in many ways, it's also a cultural desert for a number of the residents, being that there's very few theaters in Detroit. So we thought that the museum, and I view the museum as a cultural hub that all the universities and institutions can associate with. So we thought we'd take a look at our history outside of what is normally taught in educational institutions and put together a series of films and have scholars come in to have a conversation with the community after seeing the film, but also to augment our website with reading material so that someone could actually read and be informed prior to seeing the film so they could have a more informed interaction with our scholars. Okay. So that's a program that started in September and ran through June for 10 months from 2012 until I took on Director of Programs, and that program runs continuously throughout the year. Before the break, we talked about a film or program on the Wilmington 1898 massacre, which took place in North Carolina. We'll be showing a film called Wilmington on Fire, and we'll have Professor Jeff Ward from the University of California and the filmmaker engaged in a conversation, and then have books to augment that particular program. So we've had a variety of films, such as films on Patrice Lumumba, films on Robert Franklin Williams. These are names which may not be familiar to the general population. Robert Franklin Williams actually was the gentleman that caused the United States to have a relationship with China. Yeah, he actually was one of the first proponents of armed self-defense out of Monroe, North Carolina, as the president of the NAACP, a narrative that's not spoken of. We just had a film on from Montgomery to Memphis, highlighting the King of '67. Typically, King is thought of as 1963, I Have a Dream. But there's no emphasis on the Beyond Vietnam speech at Riverside Church, April 4th, '67, or his organizing economic workers. So his economic plan and his movement against Vietnam were some of the key reasons that he was cited by the government to be assassinated.
Okay. You know, while we were on the break, we talked about, this film series sounds very intellectual, very informative. This is the kind of series where you go, wow, I had no idea that was happening, and it's very beneficial. And I think once we become adults, our curiosity maybe and our interest in how did we get here grows. But when you're a teenager, you know, maybe that's not it. Do you attract many young people, and what are you doing with DPS or any of our other school systems to attract them to the museum or even to this film series? Because here's the thing, there's two things here. One, we talk about DPS, and we know that most of that population is the African American population. While there's always room for us to know more about our own history, sharing that with non-African Americans is just as important, if not more important, that they know the story as well. And so that there is some context when you see protests like the Black Lives Matters rallies or even the D15? What's the context? Because even when we talk about Dr. Martin Luther King, and you said this is his pre-I Have a Dream speech, when he was in Washington, D.C., that speech was about the janitors, the labor movement, and fair wages and equitable treatment. So I just wonder, how engaged are you with young adults who, or not you, but the museum, and how do you interface with them?
Our entire lower level of our museum is devoted to youth, where we have Inspiring Minds, an exhibition that looks at great Black inventors. We will be rolling out a new library for youth. Our programs are layered. We have a series of programs, Meet the Scientists, and focus on the STEM courses that's focused toward the youth. But even during our larger programs, when we have King Day, for example, we had an area where youth came and creatively engaged in terms of spoken word and areas of interest that they expressed their own creativity around the subject of King. We're partnering very extensively with a number of cultural institutions in the Midtown area. For example, we just had a play, a concert, and an opera that we developed with the Michigan Opera Theater, where we brought in Detroit Public School children who may not have ever had an opportunity to see an opera, actually called Lakan Fuji Pizza, meaning mushroom pizza, and after had pizza for the children. The program we mentioned on Gigi Coleman, the aviator program, that's going to be focused toward Detroit Public School children. So we really target, that is a demographic that is important, not only that youth, but that millennium group, on how to bring them in so the museum becomes their space. We're working with Teen Zone, an organization to bring teens into the museum so they can utilize space successfully. So there are a number of initiatives designed in that area.
So do you, you know, the museum is clearly doing a lot of outreach, and you're engaging DPS. And you know, the state of DPS, we've just announced the state school reform office that is planning to close some 20-odd schools in Detroit. How is this going to affect your programming and even or your freedom schools at the museum?
Well, actually, the Freedom Schools is in response to the failure of Detroit Public Schools to effectively educate our children. We wanted to have an alternative for children on the weekends to come and receive a very high-level education from former professors, actually developing curriculums and teaching children science, math, English, the basics, as well as augmenting with cultural expression and arts. These are things that were taken out of Detroit Public Schools. At one point, Detroit Public Schools were the schools with the center of a community. And now there's areas where there's pockets where there are no schools in multiple communities where a child may have to catch several buses to get to a school. So it's really been under significant attack from 1999, actually, when the schools were very solvent. And there was both a Democratic and a Republican desire to capture the revenue of $1.5 billion out of those schools and to take ownership, really the start of the takeover of emergency managers coming into our community and disenfranchising the population. So it's a very serious issue. On February 5th, we'll be having a program looking at emergency crisis in each DPS. February 5th, that program would take place where a number of community groups are combining to respond to this latest onslaught.
When we talk about arts, culture, and education, history, and in the context of our public schools in general, DPS specifically, how do we make sure that our young people are receiving the education that they need? Are these cultural institutions or the freedom schools pulling away from our traditional systems, or are they assets to that? Are they supplementals to our traditional public school systems?
Well, actually, public school system is an outgrowth from an effort to educate African Americans in the South, and freedom schools is one of those issues as well. So it's really something to augment. It's not a replacement of Detroit Public Schools, since our programs are on Saturdays from 10 to 12. Okay. Very similar to, in the past, there used to be a hub program, or Horizons Upward Bound, which would also augment what was taking place in Detroit's public schools, giving students another opportunity to further advance. So it's in that tradition. We just celebrated King Day with the Reverend C.T. Vivian, who received the Medal of Freedom Award in 2013 from Obama, who is one of the founders of Upward Bound School. So I place it within that tradition of self-determination, that we have to not simply complain, but to actually put processes and structures in place to continue to educate our most vital asset in this community, which are our children.
Right. They are a vital asset. You know what else is a vital asset? The Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History.
Absolutely.
And I know that I have a relationship with the arts and theater in the city of Detroit, and I know that arts and museums and theaters are having survival. They struggle for patrons. How has that been for the museum? Is there a constant struggle to attract new audiences? Is it growing? And if it is, what are some of the barriers that you think? Is it everything is very much more online focused, so people aren't coming to buildings anymore? And how can we improve and enhance to make sure people don't forget?
Yeah, so what we've been doing actually is collaborating with various institutions, collaborating with all the universities throughout the region and nationally, leveraging technology as far as Skyping. We've actually had Skyped and had conversations between children in Senegal with students from the DPS in our institution. We have relationships with the National Museum, with the Schomburg, but also, as I indicated, working relationships with the DIA, with the Arab American National Museum, with the Michigan Opera Theater, with the Wayne State University Reuther Library. So these type of co-joining of funds between institutions to bring a higher lift to some very serious and engaging programs and to market them effectively. So I think we certainly are seeing an increase in interest in the Charles H. Wright Museum from a variety of institutions. For example, this year we will be commemorating the 1967 Detroit Rebellion, which we started in July 23rd when we erected our landmark sculpture on our grounds by the eminent artist Charles McGee, called United We Stand, which represents 7 races in a somewhat of a musical dance. So we use that United We Stand as a rallying call for people to come together to support those issues that are important to them. But again, as a leader in this community, we really want to tell the truth. We want to get at the truth through history. Oftentimes the truth is not accessible and not available, and people will go through their entire life with a total misunderstanding of the history of the United States or the placement of Africans' contributions. So this is what we really are about, to correct misinformation, as Carter G. Woodson's book, The Miseducation of the Negro, but it's really been the miseducation of America.
Yeah.
In many ways. So people feel they have a degree and they really have no knowledge of the real history of the United States.
Once again, I'd like to thank my very special guest, Mr. Charles Ferrell, the Director of Public Programs at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History in Detroit, Michigan, for joining us. And thanks to all of you for watching. If you have an idea for a show or would like to be a guest on the show, please contact my office, and that contact information will be on the screen. Until next time, I'm Leslie Love, and this is From Lansing with Love.